Good evening. Look at this. We got so many people in already before 8 o'clock.
Good evening, good Rabbi.
Barry, good to hear your voice.
Good to make it sound.
Let me see if I can up the volume over here. There we go. Okay. How are you, Barry?
My wife is sitting next to me looking at the screen. She says, "Is that you?"
Well, is it? I guess we'll find out tonight.
Oh, okay.
How are you, Leib Moshe?
I'm well, Rabbi. How are you?
Baruch Hashem. Thank you for asking, Joe. Morris. Okay. Oh, there's a button to admit. Oh, didn't know that. Trying to figure out why when I press the plus button on my volume, the sound gets lower. So I'm just going to, for a minute, exit full screen, go to the bottom right over here, go to my audio. Oh, here it is. Okay. Let's put it all the way to the top. Okay, looks like it's 100%. Let's go back to full screen view, full screen. Okie dokie. Let's just see if anyone else is trying to get on. Okay. Put the phone onto. There we go. Okie dokie. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to lesson number 5. Lesson number 5 of Journey of the Soul. Tonight is a very interesting class, which we will get into soon. I want to hear all of your thoughts, fears, concerns, and wonderments. Before we begin and get into the nitty-gritty, let's start with our round of gratitude. Mordechai, how are you?
I'm well. On a little vacation.
Nice.
And you?
Baruch Hashem, doing well. Grateful
Baruch
for
Hashem.
tonight's class. It was a hard one to wrap my head around, and I think I have clarity on what I have clarity on and clarity on what I don't have clarity on. I understand what it is that I know, what it is that I don't know, and I think that that's a big blessing for me. I did not know anything about reincarnations before preparing for today's class, other than the fact that I knew that such a concept existed, but how it existed and what it meant, I had no idea. So I am very grateful to be teaching this class because it gave me a lot of knowledge, and I'm hoping that you will also gain some of that. So thank you. That was my turn. On to you, Barry. What are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful that I'm here today, and from being reincarnated from an ancestor of mine, and I'm as a human and not a frog.
Nice. What about Carol? Would Carol like to share?
I'm grateful for Barry, who always keeps me laughing.
Good.
I'm grateful for everything, my children, my grandchildren. I'm just grateful for my life that I've been so blessed.
Nice. Thank you. Joan, if you can hear us, we'd love to hear what you're grateful for this evening.
I'll be very grateful if I could figure out how to use this in a minute.
Okay, well, we hear you. Your video was on before and now it went off, but we hear you, and we are grateful that you're joining us.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here with everyone.
Oh, we see you now. What about Marcus? How are you?
Marcus is fine. Marcus is finishing dinner.
Sorry?
I said Marcus is finishing dinner.
Marcus is grateful that he has food to eat. Thank you.
Amen. Yes.
Okay, and Mommy, thank you for joining. What are you grateful for this evening?
This evening, I'm grateful that Hashem gave me the ability to start arranging Pesach cleaning with my husband.
Okay, thank you for that reminder that Pesach is coming faster than we could imagine. Thank you, and I'm glad that that is starting to go well. Okay, so I don't know if it's just me or do you guys also all feel like we've been here before? Like here on the Zoom? Okay, that was a joke. Last week, we spoke about cleansing. We spoke about the cleansing process, which allows us to go into Gan Eden and what Gan Eden is, the experience of being there with Hashem. But is that the end of the journey? Is there life on earth again after that? So understanding the answer to that, hi, Mommy, we see you now. Understanding that may impact our life down here on earth and may change our perspective on a few things. So what we're going to discuss tonight are four main concepts, which is what reincarnation is according to Kabbalah, what's the purpose of reincarnation, are there other forms of reincarnation, and how do we know what our mission is in this incarnation? The way I'd like to frame it is as 5 questions. We'll discuss more questions than that also, more topics than that as well. But the 5 questions that we're going to focus on are, number 1, is this our first time on earth? Number 2, what is the purpose of reincarnation? Question number 3, can we remember past lives? Why or why not? If we are reincarnated, what happened to that whole idea of paradise or Gan Eden or whatever we want to call it that we spoke about last week? Okay, Joan had that question. And is there such a thing as non-human reincarnations? So before we begin, I'd like to extend a thank you. Okay. So that means, Mordechai, that I'm not going to be able to see you if you have a question. So you'll have to unmute yourself and speak up if you have a question.
Okay, it keeps knocking me off, Rabbi. That's why I said that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So if you're, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Whichever way is best for your internet, and we are grateful that you're here. So I'd like to extend gratitude to Yerucham Kopelman and the Neshama Foundation for bringing us these 6 courses. May him, his partners, and everyone involved in the sponsorship experience many blessings, especially as we're approaching Pesach, the blessings of freedom from all inner and external turmoil. And as we're coming from Purim, that they may be blessed with inner joy and happiness. Moving right in, first thing that we need to understand is what is the source? Everyone's going to be asking tonight, what is the source? Where do you know that? How do you know that? So the answer to that question is that the source of everything are the texts in your books. And you can look at those, you can read them in the original, see the context over there. That is the context of the sources for this evening and also all the other courses, everything that was there. If there is something that you have a question on, that you are not seeing the source in your textbook, please let me know and we can arrange a source for you. Yes,
Excuse me,
Moshe.
Rabbi. For me, you keep freezing. Does anybody else having that problem?
No.
Okay, maybe it's just my connection.
Yes,
You're sharing.
Yes, it's
could be
dragging
you're
and
sharing
freezing up.
Wi-Fi's connection.
yeah.
Okay, well, we see you. So, my first question for everyone here this evening is, are you disturbed by the idea of reincarnation, or do you like, enjoy, appreciate, and love the idea of reincarnation? And then I'm going to ask you to defend your position. Why do you feel that way? So let's go around. Joan, can we pick on you?
Sure. Well, it seems interesting. It's just an interesting idea. As a child, remembered there were times as a child that I thought, this feels familiar. There's something about this moment or this situation that, I don't know, I feel like I've been here before. I don't experience it as an adult, just as a child, a number of times. So who knows what that was?
Okay,
But-
so I'm trying to gauge our feelings, our positive and negative feelings, and figure out where they're coming from or what they are, to help guide the conversations this evening. So yeah,
I just have a question though. Last week we learned that it took 12 months to go through the process of becoming more with God. And then I thought then we reached heaven. But now it seems there are pieces that continue, sparks, whatever, of us that continue on until we make that better connection. And we do all our 613 mitzvahs in the 4 portions of the Torah and become all we can become. I'm just confused with the
yeah,
difference.
that's a great question, and we will be addressing that this evening.
Okay.
Barry, it seems like you enjoy the idea of reincarnation. Why is that? What do you like about the idea of reincarnation?
I'm having a lot of fun in my life.
Okay. Carol, what are your feelings about reincarnation?
I don't know. I've read, I don't know, there's a book written by a psychiatrist, Brian somebody, Weiss maybe, called Many Lives, Many Masters. And I may have heard him speak once a long, long time ago. And he was a genuine person who hypnotized people and took them back to past lives. And recently I watched on Netflix a mini series about that very subject. Reincarnation was just one of them, but it was about people who had had near-death experiences, and then it covered the different subjects, reincarnation being one of them. And I think that I believe it. I believe it. I think we're recycled souls. I don't know why, but I think that's what we are.
Okay, I like the word recycled. How does that make you feel? That your soul is recycled?
It's good. I'm glad
Plastic.
they didn't throw me away on garbage day.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Mommy, would you like to share your feelings about reincarnation? What do you feel? Do you feel positive? Do you like the idea or you don't like the idea?
Well, when I was young and we learned about this, that you come back as someone else to fix up something else in your previous life. So I was always worried that in my previous life, I may have been almost perfect. I could have been a tzaddik, and I was afraid that I might mess it up now. Since then, I've learned a little bit more, specifically that the Rebbe said that the Lubavitcher Rebbe told us that we are the last generation before Mashiach comes, and therefore the concept of incarnations is pretty well complete.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to that also. Thank you. Lev Moshe, do you enjoy the concept or the thought of reincarnation?
I don't think that I have either a positive or a negative response to reincarnation. I find the knowledge of the Jewish perspective on reincarnation interesting. And then I understand the reason behind it is that we are perfecting and improving our souls so that eventually all parts of us can eventually be in Gan Eden and be with God. That's what I found most interesting about this whole subject, this whole chapter.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lev Moshe. Mordechai.
I learned about reincarnation many years ago when I was introduced to yoga. And it always interested me as a topic. And I would echo what Leigh Mersha said about the perfecting of the soul by coming back as many times as necessary.
Mhm.
But I don't have a positive or negative slant per se. Just that if that's what it is, then it just is.
Okay.
But
Is
I
it-
resonate with what Leigh Mersha, if I'm saying his name right, Lewis, what he said about the perfecting of coming back until we get to that point before we can be in Gan Eden.
Okay.
So that doesn't
And
make a
Mark-
very positive statement about all of us that we're here. We're all imperfect. We haven't done our job yet.
Yeah, I was gonna wait till everyone's done and then ask this question, but really, does that like? It's not very inspiring to feel like we're all damaged goods, that we all messed up in some other lifetime, and now we're here to fix up other people's mistakes.
Well, we're all supposed to be recycled souls. Isn't that what was it Rabbi Schneerson who said that? That we're all recycled souls?
So we're gonna get there, and the words, the actual words, the precise words are very important. I feel from Lev Moshe and Mordechai both this concept, which doesn't sit well with me, that someone else messed up, and so now I have to go through life. We'll get there. Marcus.
Oh, boy. I've been told several times in my life that I'm a young soul. And with all the mess ups I've done through my life, I believe it. And if I do have, it would be nice to be able to improve on it sometime down the road. But the only thing that came to my mind when you're talking about, the reincarnation thing involved my mother. The spring after she passed away, my father and I were at we're back up in Philadelphia in the house that I grew up in, I was raised in. And sometime during the day, all of a sudden there was literally a white dove that was on the back window looking in and chirping around and whatever. And I was going to shoo it away, but I thought, oh no, leave it be. And this continued for like 5 days. My mother's name is Toiva, which is dove. So was she watching out for me? And my father, probably knowing her. The other incident that I had was when I came down here in 2009. It was about almost a year after my father passed away, which was about less than a year and a half after my mother passed away. And I was looking to buy a house down here. And this house that I live in right now has it's on a little lake, it's here in Lauderhill. And there's a little porch, with a resting chair and a couple of the outside chairs. Now, when my mother was alive and they lived up in Sarasota, she had this habit every day after she ate breakfast to take her coffee, sit on the lounge and go into the lanai and just look out onto the green area. She didn't have a lake. She just had a massive green area. So when I came into this house to look at it, I had, I was looking from the living room out to the, to the porch there, and I could have sworn it was my mother in the resting chair looking at the lake. So there's very few people I've ever said this to, but this is what came to mind when we're talking about this. So, of course, I looked back the second time, and of course, the image was gone. So,
Okay. Thank you for sharing those stories, and thank you for the perspective you shared in the beginning that I think was different than others, which is that I messed up. So I look forward to having another chance to correct it.
No, I'm messing up here. I'm messing up in this life.
Okay, great. So
Great.
what we're going to do now is we're going to go through 5.1. It's an exercise. It's going to be on page 175, exercise 5.1. And I'm going to ask you to raise your hands whether you think it's true or false. And this is going to be our our entry into the class, and we'll circle back to this at the end of the lesson. So, for question number 1, belief in reincarnation is basic to Judaism. If you believe it's true, raise your hand. Okay, if you believe it's false, raise your hand. Okay, in the Jewish view, reincarnation means that a soul that inhabited one body returns to inhabit another body. Sorry, that inhabited one body returns to inhabit another. If you think that's true, raise your hand. Okay, and if you think it's false? Okay, a human soul can be reincarnated in a non-human entity such as an animal or plant. True? Okay, false?
Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, a reincarnated soul does not have its own identity, but shares its identity with someone who lived in a previous lifetime. True?
Yeah.
False? Okay. The purpose of doing good in one's current lifetime is to be reincarnated as a person of higher status.
Okay, I flunked.
I don't know.
Okay, and false? This, by the way, is something that is in certain Eastern cultures, very prevalent belief that the purpose of a living life is in order to be reincarnated as a higher status, and the better you were in your previous life, the higher status you have in your next incarnation. Number 6, a soul is reincarnated as a penalty for sins committed in a prior life. Reincarnation is a penalty. True?
Well, it's
Well, if that's true, maybe I'm not such a young soul.
And false? Okay, most souls today are reincarnations. True? False? Okay, so we had some truths, we had some falses. I hope that you were thinking about the questions nonetheless, and let's springboard right into the lessons. Number 1, is reincarnation a Jewish belief? And the answer is a resounding yes, though it depends. Many of the rationalist philosophers did not agree or did not speak highly of reincarnation. And you can read specifically Rabbi Saadia Gaon, etc. There are many of the philosophers, rationalists, who did not believe in reincarnation and had some very strong words to say about belief in reincarnation. Though it is possible and has been suggested that most of these scholars who rejected the idea of reincarnation were written and were speaking before the Zohar was written. So Kabbalah, which literally means something that was received, this is the hidden, secret, inner dimension of the Torah that was taught to Moses at Mount Sinai. Moses taught it to his student, and it was only a select group of individuals who were privy to the Zohar, the Kabbalah, in each generation. Only through the last few hundred years has it been widespread and made available to everyone to study the Kabbalah. So there was once a rabbi who's going and is talking to someone and he's trying to speak to him about God and Judaism and tefillin and mitzvahs. And the guy says, listen, I don't believe in God. Look at all these horrible things that have happened. I don't believe in religion. Look at how many atrocities were committed in the name of religion. There can't be a God. And the rabbi said to him, the God that you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. So it's very possible that the reincarnation that the philosophers didn't believe in, Kabbalah doesn't either believe in. Let's start with one of the basic texts. It comes in the Siddur. Almost every text of the Siddur has this in the prayer before retiring for the night. As part of the evening Shema, we say this prayer, and I'm very excited for everything that we're going to be learning today. A lot of it was new to me, and I'm happy to share it. And let's dive right in with text number 1. Do we have a volunteer? Leib Moshe, text number 1.
Master of the universe, I hereby forgive anyone who has angered or vexed me or sinned against me, either physically or financially, against my honor or anything else that is mine, whether accidentally or intentionally, inadvertently or deliberately, by speech or by deed, in this incarnation or in any other.
Okay. So before we get to the bombshell, which is those last few words, how brilliant and how beautiful. Every night to leave go of all the anger, frustration, anybody that wronged us, any pent-up feelings that we have inside us, letting go and resolving. How good that is for us, physically, emotionally, mentally, to be able to do that every evening. And that's in the Siddur. And at the end, it says very clearly, whether it was in this incarnation or another incarnation. And we all say that. And so that's a pretty early text. But what is this incarnation thing? What does it mean? Who is it for and what does it do? There was a guy who comes into a doctor's office and the receptionist asks, what do you have? He says, I have shingles. She says, okay, write down, take the form, write down your name and your medical info and your insurance card and everything. He sits down, writing it down. 15 minutes later, the nurse comes in, takes him to the examination room, takes his height and his weight and his vital signs and says, okay, the nurse will be with you shortly. 20 minutes later, nurse comes in and does a full examination, takes his blood, does, the whole thing, his full medical history, any surgeries, what medications he's ever had, all the way back to, his circumcision, everything from the beginning till the end. And then the doctor comes in. And the doctor says, what do you have? He says, I have shingles. The doctor does a full exam, head to toe, and says, listen, I don't see any shingles here. I've checked you out. He's like, no, they're in the truck. Where do you want me to put them?
Oh, jeez.
So the same thing could mean something else to someone, depending on where our headspace is, depending on what we're conditioned to think. If he would have walked into a hardware store and said he has the shingles, nobody would have thought that it was anything other than a delivery of roof tiles.
Right.
You walk into a doctor office and say you have shingles, they're going to think you've got the shingles. So what is this whole reincarnation thing, and what does it all mean? So the first thing that we're gonna speak about, I think it's not the first thing. I think I said the first thing many times already this evening. Where do we know about reincarnation from?
I said we're learning many firsts.
So this is all from the Arizal, from the Kabbalah. Most of what we're going to learn tonight is based on the Zohar or the Arizal's teachings. You're going to see it as Rabbi Chaim Vital, because he's the author of the books. Rabbi Isaac Luria, the author of the Lurianic Kabbalah, he passed away, I think, when he was 38 years old. He lived a very short life, but a very accomplished life. And he brought down a tremendous amount of Kabbalah. And his student is the one who was given permission to write down all of his talks. This is a man, when we're talking about a man, I know what I dream about at night. I don't know what you guys dream about at night. But he said that he experiences divine revelation, like he learns 8 times more at nighttime while he's sleeping than he does when he's awake. So when his soul goes up to God in the nighttime and learns with God, when he woke up in the morning, he remembered everything he learned at nighttime. So we're talking about a very different kind of person than we are. And he is the primary source of everything that we have over here. So let's get into text number 2. What is a soul? Where do they come from? And before we get into text number 2 and actually read it, I want to preface that there's a lot that we're not going to cover tonight. We could speak for hours and hours and hours and still not have a full grasp and concept of what actually a soul is. As a spiritual being, we can speak about the spiritual makeup of the soul with the 10 Sefirot. We can talk for hours about souls. What we're covering today, what we are going to cover tonight, is what is the idea of reincarnation? Not exactly the intricacies of how it works, though we'll get into some details. But we're not going to have a full comprehensive clarity because there are books and books and books of Kabbalah written. And then to understand every page of Kabbalah could take many hours. We're going to understand a idea of what's the purpose of reincarnation and what practically that means to us, as well as some fascinating concepts as well about reincarnation. That being said, let's look at text number 2. How do the souls work? What is the relationship of souls to each other? Marcus, would you like to read?
Sure. It all began with one master soul, the soul of Adam, which included all future souls. Subsequently, this master soul passed on to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and was then divided among the 12 tribes. Afterwards, the soul was further partitioned among the 70 souls, the descendants of Jacob that accompanied him to Egypt, and eventually among the 600,000 souls who left Egypt.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. Joan, before you ask, the answer is that almost everything that we're going to talk about tonight and most things that we've spoken about in previous sessions do apply to non-Jews as well. When we have Jewish authors talking to Jewish constituents and Jewish classes, we're coming at it from the perspective of Judaism. And we're talking to Jewish people. There are certain differences as it pertains to non-Jewish souls, but the general gist of most of the things we're going to discuss tonight do apply also to non-Jewish souls. I hope that answered your question.
So it includes non-Jews, you're saying, in this, beginning with Adam.
Right. So when we talk about Adam, Adam was the father of everyone. How
Okay.
exactly it works that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob got this soul from Adam and what happened to everyone in between is a good question that I don't understand exactly how it works, but the general idea is there for everything. So what does this mean? That you have a soul that starts with Adam and then the 3 tribes and then the 12 and then 70 and then 600,000. So here's how it works. Think about it like a tree that has a stem and then it has a few branches, and each one of those branches branches out into more branches and more branches and more branches. So souls do not begin linearly, that each soul begins at the same place, on the map. Rather, it's almost like a family tree. Parents have children, which have children, which have children, which have children. And there's a connection, not actually generationally, but almost figuratively, like we talk about a generational family tree, where souls branch off and branch off and branch off and split into many. So you start with Adam, who was a general root soul of everyone, included with him the sparks of all souls, which split into Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which then went into 12. Each of those 12 split until you had 70. Each of those 70 split until you had 600,000. And every one of us today is in some form or another is a reincarnation of one of those 600,000. All the millions and millions of Jews who have lived from then until now in the past 3,500 years are all reincarnations in some way or other of those 600,000 root souls. Why? And what's the purpose?
So the
There's a
model,
beautiful video. Sorry, go ahead.
the model of reincarnation, or the catchphrase of reincarnation could be: you live, you learn.
You live and you learn. Yeah. So what is going on over here? Let's look at texts number 3 and 4, possibly 5 as well. No, 3 and 4. So text number 3 and 4 are going to discuss what's the purpose of reincarnation. And before we get there, every soul, each one of these root souls has a mission, a purpose. That mission is to complete, to accomplish each of the 613 mitzvahs, to do the ones that have to be done, and to stay away from the ones that we are not allowed to transgress. In addition to that, every soul has to learn the entire Torah in each of its 4 dimensions, and we're going to get into what those are soon. Each soul has to be mechadesh, which means has to come up with its portion of the Torah. There is a portion of the Torah that is there for each soul to reveal, to bring out. And finally, there is a place in the world which is waiting for a specific soul to refine. Those are the things that a soul is here to do. To learn Torah, to do mitzvahs, and to make the world a better place, to refine the world. There are some beautiful stories. I'm not sure if we're going to have time for all of them. Let's get into text number 3 and 4, and if we have any other questions about that, we'll delve into them. So, what is the purpose of the mission, and why then is reincarnation such a strong option? Barry, would you like to read number 3? That's on student page 178.
Furthermore, you must know that every person must fulfill all of the 613 mitzvot. If a soul does not fulfill all 613 mitzvot in action, speech, and thought, it must be reincarnated until it completes them all. Well, that tells me I got a future.
Good lines. Keep them coming tonight. So every one of the 613 mitzvahs has to be thought about, has to be spoken about, learned, and has to be done. If there's a soul, one of these 600,000 souls that did not get a chance to do all of those mitzvahs, whether in action, whether in speech by learning about it, or in thought by meditating about it, has to come down again and go through those.
So what about the non-Jews? How do they fulfill the mitzvot?
Great question, Leib Moshe. The short of it is that they don't have the 613. They have the 7 mitzvahs that they have to fill. And with all the details that are included in the 7 Noahide laws, including making the world a proper, inhabitable, good place. Again, tonight we're going to be discussing mainly the Jewish part of it. I don't have a full clarity.
I'm sorry, is that like an affirmative action program for the Goyim?
It's called diversity. Isn't that the big buzzword now?
Yeah, it is. So it's very, very, very challenging for a soul to do all of the mitzvahs in one lifetime. It's almost impossible. That's why we come back down to do all the rest of them. So each of the 600,000 souls that was present at the giving of the Torah was charged with a mission to change the world, to refine. Each one of them has a portion in the world that needs to be refined. And each one of them has to do all of the mitzvahs, connecting all, or using and utilizing all of the avenues to connect to Hashem, all the possible connections to Hashem. If that doesn't happen in one lifetime, it comes down again to another lifetime. And I'm going to preempt this. It does not mean the same soul coming down again. We're going to give an example soon. Before we get to there, text number 4, Carol.
You should also realize that each individual must study all 4 of the Torah's layers, which are referred to by their acronym Pardes, orchard. These are Pshat, Remez, Jerush, and Sod. Literal allusion. Oh, this is literal. Okay, the literal allusion. What is that there?
Okay.
Exegetic.
Exegetic and mystical. It is necessary for a soul to be reincarnated repeatedly until it completes them all. But I don't even know what they mean. How can I complete them?
Okay, let's take a poll right here. There is a video that we can look at, which I think does a great job of describing it. It may push us 1 or 2 minutes over time. We may also be able to catch up good time and finish on time. Should we see if we can watch that video?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing yeses. Let me go over here. Open.
while we're waiting for you to cue that up, let me ask Marcus, how do you do that background?
It's it's one of the backgrounds that comes with Zoom. They
Yeah,
give you 6 choices.
I guess you have to be on a computer to see that because they don't show it on a phone.
No, it has to be on a computer, I guess.
Yeah. that
And I'm on
makes-
an Android, if that makes any difference. I'm on a PC, if that makes any difference.
Okay,
right,
we
well,
are ready to go, and this is going to give you a nice understanding of what's going on.
Human authors express themselves in their works, both directly and subtly, sometimes intentionally and always subconsciously. When we read a text, we can choose either to read the lines or to engage in more intricate analysis and read between the lines. The divine author of the Torah did something similar, but to an infinitely greater degree. God expressed himself in the text in multiple ways all at once, directly as well as subtly, with plenty of insinuation and a vast hidden layer of the divine subconscious. And he then instructed us to excavate it all. Jewish tradition separates these layers of understanding into 4 categories. The first is pshat, direct intention, which is derived by examining context and syntax. For example, the Torah begins with the words, Bereshis bara Elokim, es hashemayim, ve'es haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. On the plainest level of Torah understanding, this is a straightforward statement of what happened at the beginning of time. But the simple meaning is not always easy to clarify. Many biblical commentators, most notably Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, the 11th century French scholar known universally as Rashi, devoted their efforts to clarifying the straightforward meaning of the often mysterious biblical texts. Our second layer of understanding is remez, allusion. This refers to subtle communications that are encoded in the text. They can be uncovered using methods such as the numerical values of the Hebrew letters, the acronyms of words and phrases, or unusually sized letters in the Torah scroll. For example, the Torah's first 2 words, Bereshis bara, in the beginning, God created, carry the numerical value of 1116. That's the identical value of the phrase Barosh Hashanah Nivra. It was created on Rosh Hashanah. We are thereby informed that Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of creation. Our third layer of understanding is drush, interpretive. Our sages extrapolate a vast corpus of ideas and instruction from the Torah's text through methods such as textual comparison, sequencing analysis, and homiletical interpretation. For example, from a sequencing perspective, the Torah begins with the wrong beginning. It describes creation, a narrative that is seemingly secondary to the Torah's primary function as a book of guidance that tells us how God expects us to act on a daily basis. The Torah should have dived directly into the nitty-gritty of the laws. On the interpretive level, however, the Torah first describes creation to tackle a major hurdle to Torah observance. The majority of Torah laws rely on the Jewish nation owning and settling the land of Israel. We were instructed to conquer the land and never relinquish our claim of ownership over it. But such a radical claim to a territory is bound to provoke opposition. Who gives us the right to take possession of a land and claim it as our eternal heritage? The Torah, therefore, begins with creation, clarifying that God is the creator of all territories, and he has the right to permanently bequeath a specific parcel to a particular people. It then records the history of God doing precisely that with the Jewish people. With this switch in sequence, the Torah supplies the Jews with the response God expects them to provide all who accuse them of land theft and occupation. The fourth layer of understanding is sod, hidden meaning. This refers to the deeply mystical messages that float behind every phrase and letter in the Torah. For example, The word Bereshis can be split perfectly into two words, bara, shis, meaning he created six. God first formed the six emotive divine attributes, from chesed, kindness, through yesod, attachment, as described in Jewish mysticism. God then used these six attributes to create the actual universe. So there you have a sampling of the 4 layers of understanding that can be found in the Torah's very first words. Beyond this, a vast ocean of knowledge is contained in these same words. And beyond that stretches the infinite vastness of wisdom contained in the rest of the Torah's close to 80,000 words.
Okay. Did that explain a little bit about the 4 levels of interpretation? Carol, do you have a clearer understanding now?
Yes, but it's really so deep. I don't know how anyone
Okay.
in one lifetime could, absorb all of it. That's
You're
why
right,
we
and
need so many.
especially since now, like we said in the beginning of the class, that many of the human beings, all the way until a few hundred years ago, did not have the opportunity to learn these inner secrets of the Torah, the Kabbalah or Hasidus. So it's very possible that our mission here may be to just learn Torah, to learn Hasidus, to learn Kabbalah. With that comes an important caveat that there are many people who teach Kabbalah as a abstract philosophical exercise unconnected to the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvahs, which, needless to say, is not the right Kabbalah. More on that at a different time. So that's our mission. The mission of every soul is to do all the mitzvahs in thought, speech, and action, to learn every part of the Torah in all 4 levels of the Torah, and to refine their part in the world. We're going to get later into how do I know which part I have to do and what I'm supposed to be doing, because that sounds like a whole lot of stuff. But yeah, it's been a whole lot of people since the time of the Exodus from Egypt until we are today. And like my mother just said from the rabbi, that we are the last generation. So that means that there's not a whole lot left for us to do. Almost everything has already been done, and then Mashiach comes. Isn't that powerful? It could be that in our actions lies the key to the entire history of the Jewish nation. That us, a single human being, can fix, let's say, maybe 599,999 of the souls are complete. And I am the only one who's left. And all that needs to be done is one passage of Torah study or one mitzvah to complete the mission of the entire 600,000 root souls. And then Mashiach comes. It's a big responsibility, but it's also empowering. In a world that today that cries and decries and screams that you are insignificant, this is a powerful message. We still don't understand what reincarnation is and how it works. So let's get into that. What happens when there's a soul that doesn't do all the mitzvahs, learn all the Torah? But it's explained in text 6, but let's give an introduction with an example. Let's say that there was a soul, one of the people who came out of Egypt. One of these 600,000 souls did 500 of the mitzvahs, leaving 113 sparks left to be refined. Let's think of these sparks as light bulbs in the room. He turned on 500 of them, and the other 113 were not turned on. Those 500, the part that was refined, the part that was worked on, go with his soul to heaven. If he needed to go through Gehenna in order to get to heaven, to Gan Eden, that's what happens. And his soul, with those 500 sparks, have finished their journey here on earth. The other 113 are grafted into a new soul, which also has 613 sparks that need to be refined. So it's 113 from the old one, plus 500 of its own. It's a new soul with its own personality, its own character traits. It's its own soul, its own new soul. As part of this new soul, there are 113 mitzvahs that it has to complete for its mission. 113 sparks that have to be rectified by this new soul. Am I coming across clear?
I lost it there. What about the 613 other, if it's a new soul?
This
So it
new
could be a
soul,
new-
so this new soul, okay, we had an original soul that was made up of 613 sparks. 500 of them, for example, were elevated. They go to heaven. The other 113 have to come down in a new soul. But this new soul is not just 113 sparks. It needs to have the opportunity to fulfill all the mitzvahs. This new
That's
soul
what I
has a mission to do all the mitzvahs and learn all the Torah.
Right.
Right? We can't say that, oh, my previous soul did already kept kosher, so now I'm off the hook. I don't have to keep kosher. My previous soul kept Shabbos, so I'm off the hook. No, every soul has the mission and the opportunity to connect to Hashem with all 613 mitzvahs. What's the difference? What's going to happen if this soul does not fulfill a mitzvah? If it's one of the 113 new sparks that still need to be rectified, that don't get rectified in the reincarnation, then there's going to be another reincarnation. If it's one of the 500 souls that were sparks that were already rectified in the original soul, the new soul does not get reincarnated again.
I thought it said 3 strikes and you're out.
We'll get
No,
there.
you keep going.
We'll get there.
As long as you're showing improvement.
Exactly. So let's say the first soul did 500, then the second soul does another 20. Those 20 go up with his soul to, or his or her soul to heaven, to Gan Eden, to experience everything we spoke about last week. And now we have 93 sparks. These 93 sparks go into a new soul, which has its own full set of 613 sparks, but 93 of them are from an quote unquote old soul. But it's a new soul with sparks from the other one. Every soul is its own identity. It's not the same soul coming back again and again. We're going to see that in text number 6.
Excuse me, Rabbi. So does what you're saying preclude knowledge of your past life?
We'll get there. It's a good question. Like Carol said, there are, hypnotists and things like that. I don't know exactly how the soul works. It's very complicated. Which part of, maybe it's something unrelated to this Gilgul, to the reincarnation. It's possible that there are parts of your mission that are subconsciously driven by certain memories that are accessed by these people, and it's not necessarily actually something that really happened to you in a past life. So there are too many variables for me to have a clarity on that subject, but we're learning and we're moving towards it. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. And Mordechai, did you have a question?
Is there a limit of the return to complete all the mitzvot, so to speak?
Is there a limit to how many times the soul has to come down?
Yeah.
Until it finishes everything.
So it's over and over until it's complete.
Yeah, pretty much. Over and over it seems to imply that it's the same soul coming down again. So it would be a little different. It would be a new soul and a new soul with the remaining sparks.
Right.
Right. So each soul is its own soul, its own identity. Don't worry, you don't carry everyone else's baggage. You carry your own purpose, your own mission, and part of that is to do those mitzvahs that weren't done in the previous incarnation.
Right. So it
incarnations.
retains the number of mitzvot that's done into the new reincarnation. until it's complete.
Pretty much. Pretty much. We'll
Okay.
get there soon. And Mommy, what you asked about 3 times, we will get to soon. I think that's what Leib Moshe and Joan were asking as well. So we're going to skip number 5 and F5A and B. We'll get there soon. So I mean, let's think about it as a
I'm listening.
trip to San Francisco. Sorry?
You can see that I'm listening.
Did you ever go to San Francisco? Yeah, Barry and Carol went to San Francisco. Mordechai went to San Francisco. There's so much to do in San Francisco. There's the Golden Gate Bridge. You can take pictures there a whole day. Sunrise and sunset. There's the pier. There's that that strip with all the antique dealers and the street peddlers. There's the stadium. There are the museums. There's everything there. Restaurants. Incredible. There's so much to do in San Francisco. But you can't get it all done in one trip. Sometimes you'll want to go again for another vacation to catch up on the things that you missed. Let's go into text number 6. So many beautiful stories. Okay. Souls are not recycled. Who didn't read yet? Who would like to read? Marcus, did you read already today?
Yeah, you want me to read again?
Joan, did you have a chance to read yet today?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay,
Okay.
number 6, please.
Although we've
Good on page
stated in
182.
numerous passages of this treatise that a specific individual soul was reincarnated in a particular person, it was subsequently reincarnated in another specific individual, and so on. Do not misread this as implying that the original soul itself is reincarnated repeatedly. Rather, each human soul branches out into innumerable roots. Every root contains an infinite quantity of soul sparks. With each subsequent reincarnation, the number of these sparks are rectified and they ascend to enjoy the rewards of heaven and dwell in the particular strata of Gan Eden that are appropriate for them. However, those soul sparks that were not rectified are reincarnated to provide further opportunity for rectification.
Okay. Thank you, Joan. So what we have is that we have our mission. Every soul has its mission. If it doesn't complete its mission, then the parts that it did, the part that it excelled at, the part that it did well at, goes with its soul, the soul with its identity, with its passions, with its character traits, goes to either Gehenna or straight to Gan Eden. The parts that didn't fulfill, there's 2 ways to rectify. Now, there are 2 things that could have happened. Number 1, if there are mitzvahs that it didn't learn, Torah that it didn't learn, mitzvahs that it did not fulfill, or transgressions that it transgressed that messed up the soul, right? So back to our example with the light bulbs, it could be light bulbs that they didn't turn on, and there could be light bulbs that they smashed. So for those, there are 2 options. Either it can go first, to Gehenna, and that could fix everything and clean everything up, or reincarnation. When one or the other gets chosen is back to the unfathomable, discerning eye of God, and that's not an answer that I can answer. So the completed sparks go to Gan Eden. The rest of it has either to go to Gehenna or reincarnation. The primary role of reincarnation is to fix and to fulfill the things that weren't accomplished by the original soul or the original incarnation that happened until now. I want to make sure this is the main point that is important to tonight's discussion. And I want to make sure that we all have a clarity on what reincarnation is. Let's go over to summarize. What it is not, the same soul with the same character traits, with the same everything, the same, what were the words we used before? I'm drawing a blank.
Recycled.
Right? It wasn't recycled, the same soul with its own personality. It's not
Right.
the same soul with the same personality being recycled once again in a different body. That is not what reincarnation is. Reincarnation is when there are certain mitzvahs that were not done, or certain Torah that was not done by the root soul, which need to be fulfilled. Every soul was charged with a mission. Each one of these 600,000 souls was charged with a mission to fulfill all the mitzvahs and to learn all the Torah. So every soul takes with it the part that it did, the part that it accomplished to Gan Eden. And the rest of it gets grafted into a new soul, which has an opportunity to do all the mitzvahs and learn all the Torah, but the primary focus of that soul is to make sure to focus on the things that weren't yet accomplished. So let's say you go to San Francisco and you're there your second time. While you may have enjoyed a particular steakhouse and you might want to go there again, the primary role is to check out all the bakeries and the breakfast places because you weren't there yet. If you didn't yet get a chance to go to the stadium, but you already did the Golden Bridge, you may go to the Golden Gate Bridge and enjoy the scenery, but your primary focus of your trip to San Francisco is to visit the stadium. And that is the purpose of reincarnation. That is the general gist of why reincarnation happens and how it happens. I want to check in, make sure that we've spoken clearly and that people are understanding, and if there are any questions on that process. Or did I lose you all?
So you're saying that the sparks of a soul that were incomplete join a recycled soul that's being put into the body, and they become one and they act purposefully.
So let me
think we should-
clarify.
This text 7a, the first paragraph, I think clarifies it more.
It's a slightly different concept, what we're going to learn in text 7. So I want to make sure that we have this before we get there.
But it's doing two
Um,
things, 7.
Yeah,
Because-
7A and 7B, two separate. So
But even A has two different
has two
paragraphs. that-
parts. Let me read that again. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Joan. Your soul is not recycled, Leib Moshe. Your soul is a new soul with its own personality and its own mission and its own function.
But if I'm one of the 600,000 souls that left Egypt, how could I not be a recycled soul?
So here's the difference between the soul and the sparks. Your soul is a new soul, and included within it are the sparks that have not yet been rectified, have not yet been used, have not yet been lit up and illuminated. So within your new soul, within your own personality, there is a particular mission to quote unquote fix or take advantage of certain mitzvahs in particular. I want to make it clear that you are your own, like we just read in text number 6, you are your own person with your own set of challenges, your own baggage, and your own positivity, your own talents.
But doesn't it also say that you may have inclinations that lead you towards those mitzvahs which were left undone by those sparks?
Yeah, so we're going to get there at the end of the lesson.
Contradicts itself. In part, you have freedom of will, freedom of choice, and in part, you don't.
Please raise that question when we get there towards the end of the lesson. You know, I always used to think that an hour and a half was so long.
Not really.
Yeah.
There's so much to get through. We can make each class a 3-hour class. But Moshe, please raise that question when we get to when we get to that subject at the end of the class.
Okay.
Were there any other questions on the process of reincarnation or the purpose of reincarnation?
No.
I just want to clarify again. A soul can be reincarnated numerous times. But if it doesn't show improvement, it has 3 chances. Is that right?
Yeah, we're gonna get there in text number 8. We're gonna get there.
Okay. I'm getting ahead. I'm sorry.
That's good. I'm glad that you're reading ahead, and those who are reading ahead are probably or possibly gaining a lot more and understanding a lot better. So good on you and kudos to you. Very well done.
Thank you.
Okay, so there are other types of reincarnation, which we're going to read about in 7a, and why that happens, we're going to read about in 7b. No, Mordechai can't read. You don't have your textbook with you, right? Okay.
No, sorry.
So, in interest of time, let me read 7a. It's on student page 183. The concept of Gilgul, reincarnation, is that a soul requiring further rectification enters the body of a child as it emerges from its mother's womb, which is interesting here.
Yes.
Because what did we learn about the soul before? That it starts at the time of conception. So let's keep it for a different time. To serve as the newborn soul. It has no permission to leave that individual until the person's destined day of death. By contrast, now here's going to be another concept. The concept of Ibur. Ibur means impregnation. Soul impregnation is that a soul enters an adult body that is already inhabited by a soul, which was the soul, the person's primary soul received at birth. What is the purpose of this Ibur? Could be one of 2 things. In this case, the individual is merely impregnated with a guest soul in addition to harboring a primary soul. The individual then carries the extra soul, much as a woman carries a child in her womb. And what is the purpose of that Ibur? What does this soul do, this Ibur soul? Is text 7b. A soul experiences Ibur for one of 2 reasons. A, the impregnated soul comes to an individual for its own sake. In its previous life, it failed to perform a particular mitzvah and was therefore left lacking. This was the kind of mitzvah that was impossible to perform under the conditions of that lifetime, such as the mitzvah of Yibum, Chalitza, and the like. It is therefore not obligated to engage in a full-scale incarnation described earlier in this treatise, for soul impregnation is sufficient. What does that mean? Most of the mitzvahs, a vast majority of the mitzvahs in the Torah, apply only in Israel and only when the temple stands. So there goes your excuse that you didn't do any of the mitzvahs because 613 was too many. The vast majority of the mitzvahs apply only in Israel at a time when the Beis HaMikdash stands, at the time when the temple stands. If there's a soul that did all the mitzvahs it needed to, besides for those mitzvahs that were inapplicable in its time, then it gets to be impregnated into someone else to be able to fulfill those mitzvahs, to join that person on their mission to fulfill those mitzvahs, and then it goes back to its place where it was in heaven. Any questions on that? We're good?
Yeah.
So somebody didn't do a mitzvah, but it was not his fault that they didn't do the mitzvah. The mitzvah was not applicable in their lifetime, was not applicable to them. There are certain mitzvahs that, like for example, lighting Shabbos candles, a wife will fulfill also for her husband. Putting on tefillin, a husband fulfills for his wife, which is for a different time. There are certain general mitzvahs, like the mitzvahs of the high priest, that the high priest takes care of for everyone. Not everyone needs to be reincarnated until they become a Kohen or a Kohen Gadol. but mitzvahs that did not apply in a certain person's time. So they did everything that they could have, but there are certain mitzvahs that they didn't get a chance to do because it was not applicable to them. So they get to come just as an impregnated soul into someone who is able to fulfill those mitzvahs, and then they go back to heaven. What's the second reason? The second one is B, the impregnated soul comes solely to assist an individual, to bring a person additional merit, or to guide an individual in matters of Torah and mitzvot. In this case, the impregnated soul lacks nothing for itself. So think about it as a battery pack. Sometimes we need an extra push, and God sends a soul from an old tzaddik or something like that to help us with our mission.
It's more like having a guardian angel on your shoulder,
Or in your shoulder.
or in your shoulder, if you want to say it that way. It helps you out to do certain things, achieve greater honors, and complete more mitzvot, and then it helps you, and then it leaves.
Yep. And then there's another time. So text number 8.
Where do you go to get one of those?
I need a bunch of them. Can you have more than one?
I don't know, but I don't see why not.
I could use a lot. Dozens.
Maybe everyone here in this class is here to help you in your mission get closer to God. Maybe this class itself that's serving as a push, inspiring us, waking up our soul, maybe we are all being Iber for each other, perhaps. I don't want to say that, but
That's an
perhaps.
interesting way to use it.
Text number 8. Before we get into non-human reincarnation, we understand why somebody would come into non-human reincarnation and then whether they do. So text number 8, when a human soul comes to the world and becomes soiled by sin in the process, it reincarnates in another body to rectify itself. That second life is its first reincarnation. So you had the root soul, then you have reincarnation number 1. If it fails to rectify itself during that lifetime, again, this means that it did not do anything at all to help its soul, to further its mission. It did nothing at all in the original soul, did nothing at all in the first reincarnation. It may return in a second reincarnation. If it fails to find rectification, again, no improvement whatsoever. It may endure a third reincarnation, gets a third chance. So there's the first soul and then 3 reincarnations.
It's Hashem's 3-strike rule.
Yep, at that. After that, however, it is no longer provided opportunities for rectification via reincarnation. So in the unlikely event that you have a soul which was reincarnated 3 times, and each of those 3 times it did absolutely nothing for its purpose and its mission. No mitzvahs, no Torah learning, nothing. That soul no longer gets a chance to go again into a human body. It goes into non-human reincarnation, which is text number 9.
Is that really what it's saying? That's how you become a non-human?
Yeah, so make sure you do at least 1 mitzvah.
By being slothful and not doing anything to rectify yourself, that's where you end up.
Yep.
If you're lazy and slothful, you end up a rock.
Perhaps.
Or a plant.
Perchance. Yeah, that is the way. So
be nice to the next plant you buy after I die.
I'm laughing, but there's a story of a man who opened up a bottle of schnapps after davening one day. There was a little kiddush, when people have a yard site, they bring in some schnapps, some l'chaim, and some cookies. And the guy opened up the bottle and he poured it into the cup and he just drank it without making a blessing. And someone came over to him, a tzaddik who knew. We don't know, we're not tzaddiks, but this guy's tzaddik knew. And he says, "You fool, you got to make a bracha." He said, "Your father's soul came down as a barley or wheat or whatever grain it was. And anyways, to make a long story short, he was waiting, perhaps one day he's going to be able to make a blessing. And then he was distilled in the water and he became into the vodka. And this guy is praying that maybe someone's going to make a blessing on him. And then he was bought by the son of this guy. And he's like, yay, he's so happy that the son's going to make a blessing on him. And this guy just opened up the bottle and poured the mashke and drank it without making a blessing. The father was so despondent that nobody made a blessing on him. We don't know what the things are around us, what could be going on. Now, to clarify, the cows and whatever may be reincarnated is just a regular cow. You don't have to be spooked out when you eat supper or breakfast tomorrow morning that you might be eating grandpa. That's not how it works. The food is food just like any other food, but there is a spark of a soul that needs to be elevated. So when we make a blessing on it, we may just be allowing rectification for some reincarnated soul that had to come into food or vegetation. You never know. You can't know. But
That's
just bear
why
that in mind.
That's why everything is a blessing.
Yeah. To make positive interactions with everything in the world, and even the parts, even if it's a regular tree, it also deserves a blessing.
Yes.
There is an energy of God keeping it alive, and one day we'll make a session about how rocks, water, dirt, and cows can talk. And Leib Moshe probably already knows it. We've discussed it once or twice, but that's for another session. Behold, God does all these. Page 186. Twice or thrice with man. That's a quote from Job. The limitation of twice or thrice applies with man, meaning that a human soul is not subsequently reincarnated in a human body. After 2 or 3 times, it's no longer with man. Rather, it is forced to wander the planet until it is reincarnated in an inanimate, vegetative, or animal entity. Then, after it has done its penance, there is hope for its future, for God's endless mercies extend to all of his creations. To summarize, we've spoken about how souls work. The, I guess, etymology of souls, very much like our bodies, begin as a single cell and then multiply and multiply and multiply and multiply until we have all our organs that are our body. You have the same thing with the souls as well. We spoke about the variations of reincarnations, which is the regular reincarnation, which we spoke most about, the purpose of it, its mission, and our mission. And then we spoke about Ibor, which is the impregnation, and we spoke about non-human reincarnation. So today, we are all, as Mami said, we are all reincarnations. Do we know our story? Every good barbecue sauce comes with a story, right? In 1969, Sweet Baby Ray was playing basketball, and he made a sauce, and then we love it, right? Every good barbecue sauce comes with a story. Do we know our story? And the answer is some very holy, special people can know our story. Perhaps the reason why we don't is because it would be too much to handle. There are stories, I wish we had time for some of them. Maybe we'll stay on a few minutes later and say some stories for those who would like. But who was I and what is my mission? Wouldn't it be amazing? I sometimes think, imagine what would have happened if I would have been able to go to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a real prophet, a Kabbalist, someone who sees and knows souls, and ask him, what's my mission in life? What do I have to do? And then go and focus on that, do that. Wouldn't that be so much better? Wouldn't that be great?
There'd be no guessing
Be easier.
and no speculation.
You'd be
Right.
direct.
But God doesn't want us to do it that way. God wants us to work hard. However, he gave us guesses. He gave us clues. He gave us ways to a certain degree. In texts 10, 11, and 12, we will explore that. Text number 10, who was I? What is my mission? On page 187 from the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. You can read his bio on the page. It is impossible to deduce or intuit, not QuickBooks, but whether one possesses a reincarnated soul or not, unless one is the recipient of a mystical communication in this regard. And I want to point again to what Carol mentioned before about previous lifetimes and things like that. It's real that those things have some kind of conscious or subconscious importance to you and to your mission. However, not necessarily does it actually mean a past lifetime. It could be some kind of metaphor, right? I know somebody who they, in their mind's eye with hypnosis, they saw themselves running through forests. They saw themselves as stranded babies in World War I, things like that. Now, whether that is a metaphor, whether that is real and really happened, it's possible that they were in a previous incarnation like that. It's also possible that it's a metaphor, that their brain is putting into certain memories, or their subconscious is allowing us to experience that metaphor to teach us something about ourselves emotionally, physically, mentally, or perhaps even spiritually. I wanted to bring that up because there are people who profess to say that this was your past lifetime. Not necessarily is it actually a past lifetime. It could be a metaphor for something that's going on or that happened to us as we were a child. You may wonder, how then will we know the purpose for which we entered this world? Which mitzvah must we scrupulously perform? Or which transgression we must especially avoid? So if we don't know who we were, we don't know what our mission is, how do we know what to focus on? And here's the answer, and this is perhaps the most important point to take away from tonight's class. Understanding the way reincarnation works and understanding what our purpose and our mission is today and here, knowing these next few sentences, we experience natural affinity and longing to perform a certain mitzvah when that mitzvah is critical to our present incarnation. Or our inclination strives especially hard to entice us to commit a particular sin, for it is the very same sin in which we blundered during our previous life. Now imagine that you are a general in an army, and you see that the enemy is constantly trying to strike at a particular vantage point. You'll learn pretty quickly that for reasons that you don't understand necessarily, it is an extremely strategic stronghold, and they believe that they will get you and that they will be able to conquer you if you cave in that spot. Same way it works is with us as well. If there's a certain transgression that we have a very strong desire for, something that doesn't make sense for it to be extremely hard, but something that we can almost not stop ourselves from doing, that's your mission. That's your purpose. Same thing is also, if there's a certain mitzvah that you love doing, that's your mission, that's your purpose. Keep on doing it and do more of it.
So you can have both good and bad intentions.
Please explain.
You're saying that you have this inclination and it strives especially hard to entice us to commit a particular sin in some cases. But in other cases, you're saying it helps, it drives us to perform certain mitzvahs.
Yeah, exactly. So you can have both. If your evil inclination is trying specifically hard to make sure you transgress a certain avera, that's something that you have to be very careful to stay away from. If your good inclination is trying very hard and loves specifically to do a certain mitzvah or learn a certain area in Torah, delve into it and do more of it. There's a joke they say of, certain Hasidic rabbis, they have what's called shirayim, which is they bring out a big plate of food and the Rebbe takes one piece, and then it's the leftovers are considered holy, and everyone tries to grab pieces of the rest of the plate from the Rebbe. So they say a story of one Hasidic Rebbe, and he died, and his son-in-law took over, and they come to the first big gathering, and they bring out the big tray of food for him to take his piece. Everyone's expecting him to take one piece and to leave the rest. He eats one piece of chicken, and the next piece of chicken, and the kugel, and the herring, and the fleisch. He devours the entire plate. Someone turned to him and asked him, well, what's going on over here? He said, my father was a holy man. He knew which one had the sparks that he needed to elevate. I'm not so holy. So I know that something here is for me to elevate. I had to eat the whole tray, hoping that one of them was the right one. let's look at this letter from, you can read text 11 at your own pace. It's a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, from the Lubavitcher Rebbe to somebody who said that he's having a lot of difficulties with his marriage. And the Rebbe's response to him, the Rebbe was a seer, the Rebbe could tell people. The Rebbe said, your job, one of your special mitzvahs is marital peace and harmony. So the Yetzer Hara, your evil inclination, is going to try mighty hard to get you to a place of strife and tension with your wife. Work as hard as you can to make good. Because that's your mission, that's your purpose, that's what you're here for. And in text number 12, which you could read also, we all end up at the right place at the right time to do the right thing. God leads us there. So how do we know what our mission is? Based on our circumstances, based on our strengths and our passions, and based on our weaknesses and struggles, we can get a pretty good glimpse about the things that we're supposed to be doing and focusing on. Will we know for sure? We won't. God doesn't want us to give up or stop doing any of the other mitzvahs because they're all important for our soul. What are we going to do to rectify these sparks? Think about where you are now. Who are you able to help in the position that God led you? We're all sitting here in the United States. That means that our purpose is not to refine something in Timbuktu or Australia because we're not there. If circumstances lead us there, perhaps we're there to make a blessing on a coconut, which was waiting from creation for us to make a blessing on it. So now we've come full circle. Okay. We are back to an understanding of what is reincarnation, how it happens, and how we know which part are we supposed to be doing. So let's go back to the original true and false. And as we're flipping back to that, let's remember once again that you do not have anyone else's baggage. You have your own identity, which can impact the entire history. So question number 1, belief in reincarnation is basic to Judaism. The answer is
True.
Yes.
it is. It does agree. And Judaism does ascribe to reincarnation. In the Jewish view, reincarnation means that a soul that inhabited one body returns to inhabit another.
Not completely.
So that would be false because it's not the same soul coming back. It's a new soul with a mission or sparks that came from a different soul. And the truth is that whether you said yes or no, you're probably right because there are parts of the soul that come back, but the identity of the soul is a new identity. A human soul can be reincarnated in a non-human entity such as an animal or plant.
True.
True, yes. A reincarnated soul does not have its own identity, but shares its identity with someone who lived in a previous lifetime. That would be false. You have your own identity and personality. 5, the purpose of doing good in one's current lifetime is to be reincarnated as a person of higher status in a future reincarnation is not at all the Jewish view on reincarnation. A soul is reincarnated as a penalty for sins committed in a prior life. Penalty, no. Opportunity to rectify and to get everything else done, yes. Most souls today are reincarnations, and that would be true. So now that we know what our mission is, this is so powerful in a day and age where everybody is being told that they don't matter, that they're insignificant, and that they live life for some random reason with no purpose and no guidance, especially the youth today. And unfortunately, we're seeing the repercussions of life without meaning. Let's look at Viktor Frankl. We all heard of Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Quest for Meaning. If you look at text number 13, he describes how important it is to know that when you wake up in the morning, you're not just redundant. You're necessary, important, we need you. And today we explored through the lens of reincarnation how exactly important we are, not only to ourselves, not only to our family, not only to those around us, not only to the entire planet, but to the entire history as well. We are helping the entire Jewish population from its inception coming out of Egypt, even starting with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob until today. We have the opportunity to help the Jewish nation reach completion of their mission to fulfill the mitzvahs and to learn the Torah. Next week, we're going to discuss a little more about how to do that, the practicality of living now, and how important life is now. With next week's lesson, Life is Short-ish, what to do during that time. But isn't that a powerful lesson? That we have the keys, we have the ability to change everything and to complete everything that was started so many thousands of years ago. So many people complain, and I hear this often. If Moses couldn't bring Messiah, how could we? If the temple times were not good enough to bring Mashiach, how could we? Imagine there's a giant who's just not tall enough to see over the wall and into the city. And there's a little toddler next to him. You take that toddler, you put him on the shoulders of the giant, and now he can peek over and describe everything that's there to the giant. That's what we are. We're little toddlers. We're little midgets, but we stand upon the greatness of the giant's shoulders. They did all the heavy lifting for us. And now it's our turn to complete those last little bits for all of history's mission to be completed and for Mashiach to come. You matter. You matter not only to yourself, not only to your family, not only to those around you, those who know you, those who you have influence over, but to the entire creation and to the entire Jewish population. May it be the will of the Lord that we are able to understand and internalize these concepts and to live with a passion born from the knowledge of who we are, and what we're here for, to fulfill that mission. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Not bad for timing. Let us go around with a round of what are you taking out of today's lesson? What's the most impactful thing you learned today or insightful thing that you learned today? And then we will have some questions and those stories for anyone who would like to stay on. Let us start with Leib Moshe. You're looking very thoughtful.
Well, what I take out of this is number one, a Jewish understanding of the concept of reincarnation, and number two, a greater understanding of how to figure out what my mission is in my life, and I think that it's helped me to define that.
Great, so practical and so beautiful. Thank you, Joan.
I'm reeling. I'm trying to process it. I really, this is heavy stuff, but it's wonderful that if I do something simple all the time, some good, then who knows what that good does in terms of the whole. But I'm
Great.
a little concerned about my past.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Carol.
I think that, I don't know, I guess we shouldn't worry about our past because there's nothing we can do about it. But there's something we can do about the future of our souls by doing mitzvahs and by, trying to make God proud.
Yeah. And to address what Joan said, perhaps if you grew up religious somewhere in Brooklyn, you would have never attended this class and never learned that there's a special mission for your soul to think about and to complete the entire history of the Jewish nation. We can never know why Hashem led us in our circumstances that he led us until today, and we can only act based on the knowledge that we have now. Barry.
Do from birth people learn as much as Baal Teshuvas?
Not at all.
Really? Okay.
Okay, maybe yes, but I don't know. It's a good question.
Oh.
It's hard to appreciate something that you've always had. I think about Tshuva starts learning and they have a better appreciation because they're adults usually, and they can they see what the results are. From birth, the results are right in front of them and they just take it for granted, maybe. Do you know what I mean? They may
Very
not
possible.
feel that intense appreciation because
They don't have that contrast.
right.
Oh, Mommy, is that you going off? Would you like to share with us something before you log off?
Very quick, because okay, I'm just grateful to Hashem that I was privileged to bring up my children in what I thought was a little bit of a complex time, but compared to today, when we're on the threshold, just about to step over into Mashiach's times in this crazy world, I hope that perhaps I imparted a little bit of strength into my children, and if not, Hashem will equip them, has equipped them with the ability to raise the little ones that will actually greet Mashiach together with the parents, the grandparents, and in some cases, the great-grandparents.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mommy. Good luck with your Pesach preparations. Mordechai.
I would say I learned how Judaism embraces reincarnation and that it actually acknowledges it or accepts it, and the purpose of it, which I never knew.
Okay.
And I also think it's very interesting to know what our transgressions are and our mitzvahs are that we need to work on. It seems obvious, but it never occurred to me.
That's why we have the masters and the teachers who have taught us these things, because not necessarily would we come to it on our own.
Right.
And Marcus.
I'm still trying to figure it out. I need to read this over again. It's a lot to think about.
Okay, good. I'm glad that there's a lot to think about for me also. There's so much more that I was toying with that we didn't have time for, but it's fascinating. This is my first class that I've given on reincarnation, and it's a good one. Really get down to the nitty gritty of what is it, how does it work, why is it, and to me, this really gave me a clarity and understanding of what reincarnation is and how it works. Thank you everyone for joining. For those of you who need to sign off, thank you for joining. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next week at 8 p.m. For those who would like to stay for some more jokes and stories, we will stay on for another few minutes, as well as questions if you have. Mark, you had your hand up?
Yes, I was just going to say that I had known of reincarnation, but I never realized how it would be anchored in Judaism and purposeful. It just seemed like it was in a vacuum. It was just a concept of, well, do I believe it or not?
Right.
But this kind of anchored into purpose and direction, as opposed to just in a vacuum of, well, there is such a thing and maybe it's possible. Do you want to believe it?
Right.
Okay, great.
So I would share that.
Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
So let's do this. Let's sprinkle some jokes and some stories. Yankel and Moshe made a pact with each other that whoever goes up to heaven first is going to come to the other in a dream and tell them what's going on. So Yankel dies first, and Marcus is already nodding. He knows this one. Marcus Marcus, sorry. So Yankel dies first, and believe it or not, a few days later, Moshe gets a dream. And in his dream, Yankel's telling him, oh, it's so beautiful. So Yankel says, Moshe says, well, what is it? He's like, what do you see? He says, beautiful, clear blue skies. It's nice and warm. There's bubbling brooks and soft green grass, mountains in the distance, gorgeous scenery. And Moshe says, wow, it sounds like it really is so nice up there in heaven. He's like, up there in heaven? Who said heaven? I've been reincarnated as a cow in Montana.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that one.
Or what is it? Little Melissa goes to her mom and says, Mom, how did humans come to be? She says, well, God created the world and he created Adam, and he goes through the whole thing until we are today. Oh, very interesting. Thank you for teaching me that. She goes to her dad and she says, Dad, how did human beings come to be? He says there was a monkey, and then the monkey evolved, and then became smarter, became a chimpanzee, and then became smarter and smarter, and eventually became a human being. And then the human beings continued evolving, and that's where we are today. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for teaching me that. She goes back to Mom. She says, Mom, you told me that God created the world and the people, and Dad said we come from monkeys. How does that work? Mom says, oh, don't worry. I was telling you about my side of the family. Dad was telling you his side of the family. So here are some interesting stories. How they exactly fit in to everything, I don't understand exactly. These stories, you have to really have a great understanding of how everything works in order to fully understand them. Let's read them. They may give us some inspiration. So the first one is that there was a man who was 40 years old, and he was seeking, he came to the Arizal, this great Kabbalistic scholar who taught most of the Kabbalah that we know today. He came for advice. So the tzaddik told him that his destined mate lived in Alexandria, and he told him in Egypt, and he told him who this woman is and who her father is. So he traveled to Egypt and he met this 20-year-old woman, and they got married. Her wealthy father gave 150,000 coins as a dowry, and they lived in luxury and love for 3 months. The wife then suddenly died. And the shattered groom returned to the Arizal back in Tzfaz and said, why did you do that to me? It would have been better for me to remain single than to experience that heartache. And the Arizal reminded him that 20 years ago, he had co-founded a bakery. His partner gave him 3 months of grief, caused him a loss of 150,000 coins, and then died without making restitution. The offending party's soul was reincarnated as a woman living in Alexandria with a dual mission of restoring the funds and compensating for the 3 months of misery. It again partnered with the fellow, but this time as his wife. She brought 150,000 into the marriage to repay the original loss and provided him with 3 months of bliss to compensate for the 3 months of headaches. Then, mission completed, her soul rose to heaven. You waited until 40 to marry, the Arizal explained, because the bakery scandal happened 20 years ago. You had to wait until she was old enough to get married. Your painful decades of searching for a partner were caused by your harboring bitter resentment all this time and your inability to forgive your former partner. For had you forgiven your partner, his soul would have found immediate rectification. But this has all been rectified, and you will now marry your ultimate partner for the good. And shortly after that, the man remarried and raised a fine family. So here's a story of souls that came down to rectify things that had gone wrong in previous incarnations. Why, how, when, why did she come down and she died? Some people die early, some people die late. What was it? But that was her mission. Her mission in life was to repay somebody money that they had wronged them and to give them 3 months of a good life. Once their mission was completed, they were able to die. There's a story, long story, but the short of it is that there was a little kid who grew up in a palace, and he was very wise and very smart. And when he was 3 years old, he was already a genius. He had surpassed all of his teachers. And so the king went to find a teacher for his son. And the priest, the highest priest, who was the king's personal priest, was the one chosen for this mission. And the priest said, okay, I'm going to do it for you, but on condition that for a half hour every day, I get to lock myself in a room, that nobody disturbs me. That's my time for my personal meditation. So the king agrees, and the student starts learning. After a few months, this little 3-year-old gets the curiosity the better of him, and he figures out a way to pick the lock and to come into the room where the priest is doing his meditation. And there, standing in front of him, is the priest in a talis and tefillin, praying from a siddur. The priest is shocked. Now his secret is out. He makes the child promise not to tell anybody what he saw. And the kid was just so intrigued. He said, what is this? What's going on? What are you doing? So he started explaining Yiddishkeit to him. And this kid was enthralled. This kid loved everything. And he learned more and more about Judaism. And he ended up actually converting and going away from the palace and becoming a Jew. When he died and came up to heaven, I'm really starting the story backwards, but we'll just continue from here anyways. He died, he came up to heaven. The angel said, very good. He lived such a wonderful life. But what about the first 3 years of his life that he ate non-kosher, that he suckled from not kosher milk from nursing? And so they agreed that this child should go back down for 3 years to be nursed by a Jewish mother, and then can go straight to heaven, and the whole mission is complete. So rewinding this story, I really should have told you after the next part of the story of this couple who didn't have children for very many years. And they came to the Baal Shem Tov and asked him for a blessing for children. And he didn't want to give them. Finally, they came many, many times. And eventually they pressured him. And he said, okay, I can give you a blessing for a child. They have the child and they're so excited. And anyways, on his 3rd birthday, this child died. So they came back to the Baal Shem Tov complaining, why did you give us this child better than you shouldn't have? So he explained to them the story, and he says that you and your husband had the merit of this very special soul. This was a soul that ended up becoming one of the greatest rabbis in that time, one of the greatest masters of Kabbalah and of the Torah. And you had the privilege of raising his soul and rectifying his mission. Now, it was still a trauma, but it helped them gain appreciation, and they were happy that though they were not destined to have their own children that would stay with them, they had the privilege of helping this soul find its rectification. That's another Google story. Here's an interesting one. The Maggid, who was a student of the Baal Shem Tov, once asked him to clarify, the Zohar makes an association of the Torah's civil laws with the mystery of reincarnation. Torah says, and these are the laws that you should teach the Jewish people. And the Zohar says, this is the secret of reincarnation. So the Baal Shem Tov told him, go to a certain forest and look around a specific tree. So he went and he stood from a distance and he watched. And as he was watching, a horseman arrived, dismounted, ate lunch, and then jumped back onto his horse and sped off, forgetting his money pouch on the grass. Another fellow arrived and paused to relax in the shade. He found the pouch and took it with him as he continued on his journey. A little while later, an exhausted and wretched pauper stopped to drink from a nearby brook and eat a crust of bread, and then he fell asleep beneath the tree. The horseman came charging back looking for his wallet. He shook the pauper awake and demanded the return of the pouch. The pauper claimed innocence. The enraged horseman delivered him a brutal beating. The Maggid came back and told the Baal Shem Tov the whole thing, and the Baal Shem Tov explained it to him. He said these 3 crossed paths in previous reincarnations. At that time, the horseman owed the traveler, who was the second man, a large sum that he didn't repay. That's the amount that was in the pouch that you saw, which the horseman lost and the traveler found, so now he repaid his debt. In their former lives, the traveler had taken the horseman to court over his debt, but the judge ruled against the traveler without bothering to ascertain what was actually the details. He just made a flippant ruling. The judge was reincarnated as that wretched pauper who was brutally beaten by the man whose favor he perverted in course of justice. So the man who he perverted justice in order to help this guy, he ended up being beaten up by that same man that he was helping in a previous thing. So it says, now you can appreciate the Zohar's association of the Torah's civil laws with reincarnation. So again, how these stories fit with what we learned today, that you don't carry other people's baggage and things don't just happen. I don't understand exactly how this all fits, but the Baal Shem Tov knew better than me and better than us. These are just some fascinating stories of reincarnations that have happened throughout the ages that we, sometimes things happen to us and we have no idea why, but in the grand scheme of things, the eye who sees and the ears that hears, the one who is the Mesabev Hasir, the cause of all causes and the interest of all interests, knows exactly what's going on. There's another story about two people. One was a coachman and one was the wagon driver. The wagon driver was very poor. The coachman was very rich. And they pulled into an inn on Friday afternoon. The coachman, the wealthy businessman on his way to shul sees someone trying to get his horse and buggy out of the mud. So he tries and he gets battered and bruised and he ends up not being able to help this man. And he goes back to shul dirty and scratched. Meanwhile, the coachman was ready for shul very early and he goes to shul and he sees a group of travelers there and he invites them to come spend Shabbos night with him to join him for the Friday night meal, for the Shabbos meal. They come, and unfortunately his wallet was not as open and wide as his heart, and they ended up leaving very hungry. Now, there's a problem because this wagon driver would have very easily been able to take this horse out of the mud, and the personal meal of this rich coach would have been, of this rich businessman would have easily fed the entire group of travelers. So they each did the wrong mission. They each fulfilled the wrong mission. So they ended up being reincarnated this time to fulfill their own missions. And there are many stories that we hear of different things that happened in reincarnations. If you look at the stories of tzaddikim of 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 150 years ago, you'll see it's full of this idea that this person came and he found a wallet and then he wanted to give it to the other guy. And the other one said, no, I don't want to take it. And then they came to the tzaddik and the tzaddik said that in a previous lifetime, you owed him this money. So now you go, like, it's full of these stories, but those were tzaddikim who knew. We don't know how this all works. What we do know is that we have a mission and a purpose. And what we're here for is to do mitzvahs and to learn Torah. And that may just be the last good deed that needs to be done, the last mitzvah, the last Shabbos that needs to be kept, the last Torah that needs to be learned to bring Mashiach for everyone. I hope these stories were enjoyable for you and brought a little bit of a different dimension. Yes, Mordechai?
No, I was going to say thank you, Rabbi. I need to go now.
Okay. Thank you, Mordechai. I think we all do. Take care.
Okay.
And if you'd like to see that video again of the course video about the four ways of learning Torah or any of the additional materials, if you go on chabadgfl.com/journey of the soul, and then in the additional materials, you click on the top bar, you'll see it'll say lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4. You can click lesson 5 there. And that way you can have access to it even before I send you the link. Other than that, have a great evening. Thank you all for joining. May you be blessed. And I look forward to meeting you next Wednesday evening.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Good
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night, everybody.
Rabbi, good night, everybody.